FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and it's, well, you're not going to believe it, but it's February 7th, 2020. Already done with the first week. Remarkable. Hey, January. I hope the January effect works for my personal financial life. If it does, this will be one of the best years of my life. So fingers are crossed and foot is going down on the accelerator. As always, we invite your comments, your questions. We're going to be talking with somebody who's an expert in China trade policy. We'll also cover the coronavirus. I think you're really going to be interested, and I'd like to hear your opinion, where you think we are with China on trade, what is going on with this virus. Anyway, your name is Daria Novak, and you were a State Department official during the Reagan administration with particular expertise in China and Chinese affairs. You wrote an article in recently we picked up, and basically that Trump is the first president to extract trade concessions out of China. And since you've been watching this for decades now, just explain to us the before Trump and now the after Trump. Where is the U.S. positioned?
I think the biggest difference that we're seeing is Trump is taking big and bold moves. And the best way to explain it is that chess game where Trump makes moves and he's staying up with the Chinese, move for move. In the past, what we had were trade administrations or presidents in the U.S. that basically were trying to move very small, incremental policies forward. But the problem became, in a chess game, you have to plan ahead and know where you're going. Previous American administrations just gave concession after concession to the Chinese without requiring anything in return. This president and this administration is standing strong and saying, if you want to trade with the United States, you will behave as an international power with norms of international trade being adhered to. We will respect you, but we are going to demand fair trade practices from you. That's never been done before. In the past, what we would see, very typical of the United States, was when the Chinese would not make any concessions, the U.S. would make a concession. When the Chinese refused to make a concession, the Americans would give another concession. And this would go on in trade talks. And I was involved in some of these until the Chinese finally recognized they couldn't get anything more out of the U.S. and then they would sign the deal. And the United States would be left shell-shocked because they hadn't gotten anything out of the deal, because the American method of negotiating is let's give a little, and see if we can get some movement. President Trump went in and basically said, this is what's going to happen. We want China to be strong. We want China to be a good trade partner, but we want them to abide by the rules. So President Trump got concessions, big concessions from China, and he got them without having to give up on the U.S. side things that he should not have given up. And, this is just incredible because we now have established a bilateral evaluation and dispute resolution office, a big name for an office that China put together for the first time, where now companies can go in and really have an enforcement mechanism. Now, if the American companies that are going into China don't get resolution, we still have actions that we can take. But this is a movement where we can force some transparency with China. In other words, a company is going to be known as either getting a resolution or not, and then the U.S. government can take some action. Things like this just haven't been done before. We're also forcing all kinds of public action plans to be implemented to actually show some progress that we can measure where China's moving. I think this is a great plan that's in the early stages yet. And I think the one thing that your listeners really need to understand is that we are not going to get everything concluded in one agreement, not when there's been such an asymmetrical relationship for so long.
Yeah. And that's to be expected. So it's got to go in phases. We still have tariffs on a lot of Chinese goods for sure. And what's really remarkable is they had to do it because look, they had this swine flu epidemic there, which killed half their their hog herd, and then they need to feed these hogs with soybeans, and the U.S. was the only place with a surplus of soybeans, and he just knew exactly when to push. And now with what's going on with the coronavirus, I mean, really, they're reeling, the Chinese, and he knew exactly when to be nice and when to be tough. It was pretty remarkable agreement, and yet his adversaries just can't admit that he actually knew what he was doing.
Trump has done a lot of things that probably aren't in the forefront of the news media, of the mainstream media. If you look at recent times, President Trump has increased the role in the economy of defense and intelligence issues when it comes to trade. People may have heard of Huawei technologies and G5 network and things like that. But what a lot of people don't recognize is that this network is basically a fusion of the Chinese government and military and is going to be used potentially to extract information. Really, literally turning over everything, because according to Chinese law, if a piece of information is carried over that network, it's automatically owned by China. So this information will be turned over to the Chinese Communist Party by their military. It's going to be owned by China. President Trump stood up and said, it's unacceptable. We know that this is a threat to U.S. security, and U.S. companies that are using or trading with China better not be doing this if it's a threat to national security. When have you heard of a U.S. president protecting the American people, the American economy that way in the past? It just hasn't happened.
Yeah, never. Pretty much never, right? It has never happened.
Never, exactly. This president has been brilliant, I think, in these trade talks. And when people say we didn't get everything, no, it is a negotiation. We're not going to get everything, at least not to start. But we got a good portion of things. We were able to hold the Chinese accountable. And if they fail to be held accountable, or aren't accountable, I should say, for their actions, we have mechanisms now in place where we can take action to penalize the Chinese, again, something that hasn't been done in the past. If we go back to the World Trade Organization, when China received permanent most favored nation during the Clinton administration, what we saw was the idea that, the Chinese will be good guys and they will want to abide by the policy, and they will make strides going forward if we give them permanent status. Well, I don't know about you, but if I was a nation and I knew I could get away with anything because I had permanent trade status, most favored nation with status, would I do what I wanted, or would I try to abide by an agreement?
Exactly.
Let the Chinese do whatever they want, and we've seen over the past 2 decades what that's meant. If we had previously 2 decades held the Chinese accountable and only allowed them concessions when they were doing what they should have been doing, we could have been competitor nations, both having an economy that would help their own people, our own people, but it didn't happen. I think now President Trump has put China in a position, and coronavirus, I think, Carrie, it increased probably the likelihood that China will abide by this agreement. But I think that the president has now put China in a position where it's going to be exposed to the world for the type of country it is, and it's going to have a choice to make. It can suppress its people. It can create intellectual property theft problems, but it's going to be exposed. And that hasn't happened in the past.
Very true. You just totally hit the nail on the head. And for such a stupid buffoon, a guy who doesn't know what he's doing, who's totally incompetent, and his father gave him all his money, he's done pretty good. He's done a pretty good job, hasn't he, Daria?
He certainly has. And you know what? If you have and you're given money, you can go 2 different ways. You can sit back and relax and not do anything with your life, or you can take those resources that you've been given and really do something good. This man did not have to give up his private life at this point in his life and choose to serve the American people. And I truly do believe it's his goal to secure the United States and to make us wealthy and prosperous. Yeah. I really, he doesn't need the salary. He's given his presidential salary back. He's not keeping the money that he's earning.
Yeah, exactly. And you can argue about things that he's said and the way he's treated people in the past, and a lot of it's valid, but it seems like he's grown as a person here. He knows exactly the landscape in Washington, and he knows exactly how to get what he wants, right?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Otis Gold Corp is a gold development and exploration company with quality projects in the pro-mining state of Idaho. Otis's flagship Kilgore project has a resource of 961,000 gold ounces, and its recently published preliminary economic assessment demonstrated an impressive post-tax IRR of 53% at $1,500 gold. In addition to the significant expansion potential at Kilgore, Otis is exploring its highly prospective Oakley project. This Carlin-type gold deposit already has an inferred resource, and previous near-surface drilling intersected 123 meters of 0.69 grams per ton gold. Otis Gold Corp trades in New York under the ticker OGLDF and in Toronto under the ticker OOO. That's triple O. To learn more, go to otisgold.com. That's otisgold.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Exactly. And you know what? This president, to me, speaks, or the word choices he uses, I should say, publicly, often to me sound like millennials speaking, or it sounds sometimes a little bit like rapper music. How can these people be criticizing them when they speak the same way? He may not be diplomatic, but we didn't get a diplomat. We got a businessman who's out to protect U.S. interests, and I'm very happy about that.
Same here. So let's look at the coronavirus, because that is having a profound effect upon the Chinese economy, upon the world economy. And so far, thank goodness, it hasn't spread to the United States that much. It looks like it's contained throughout most of the world other than Asia. What do you think? Where do you think we are with this thing? What's going to happen?
You know what? I think the first thing we need to recognize is that the United States has a very broad breadth and depth to our economy. Larry Kudlow, economic advisor, just came out, I believe it was yesterday or today, and said during the first quarter of 2020, the coronavirus is only going to have a very small impact on our economy, maybe 0.2%. That tells you how strong we are in this country right now. Now, the federal government, as far as what actions it's taken, obviously the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, have been working on identifying the parts of the virus in order to create vaccines, along with a lot of the big pharmas. So to me, if Big Pharma can go out there and create a vaccine, great. But we are having the investigators go out and do as much as we can do. The Chinese, however, on their side, have not been open. They are. It was 3 weeks, actually, before they went public with acknowledgement of the virus in Wuhan, China. The Chinese have had this type of thing happen in the past. It's not the first time. They've had several labs in China at level 4, which is like an Ebola level lab. They've had several leaks of viruses. So whether this originated in a marketplace, whether it was an accident when it was released possibly from a lab in China, no matter what the origin, the Chinese are at fault to start with for not exposing the fact that this virus was there. The U.S. has it basically contained at this point. The question becomes, do we know when transmission is possible? And from what I understand, the latest is that it is possible person-to-person transmission prior to actually having the onset of symptoms. What that means is that you and I and other people that may come in contact with someone who knows someone who has been to China could be potentially at risk. So I do think that, I would advise people to pay attention to their health right now, but I don't think that we're in a critical stage where it's going to impact our economy like it does and is doing and will in the future China's.
I'm totally inclined to agree with you. It's pretty remarkable when I hate to say this, but it's pretty remarkable when you look and you see, like, oh my God, the U.S. government actually did something correct, right? It actually worked. I can't believe it. So
it has worked, and as the CDC came out and said, we rather have an abundance of caution and have you criticize us for being too cautious than to have the opposite happen and to have a pandemic strike the United States. So I know we learned a lot after Katrina and with other viruses, how to isolate people and make sure that we don't allow the common bug or whatever is in this virus to spread beyond a limited area. You know, there are going to be some people that are ill, but most of the people that are becoming seriously ill with this virus are immune compromised or have other medical problems and complications. So I don't think that we need to panic in this country right now, but we just need to be careful.
Yeah, the panic is definitely not due yet. But I remember there was a sign in the it was like in the 60s. It said, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and panic." And that's what it just kind of reminds me of.
Well, look at today's media. They are sensationalist, and they generally don't have the depth of analysis that's needed. It's very quick, on-time reporting of events, but there's really no think time put into that reporting. So what we're seeing are pictures of people running around with masks on their face, which may or may not be good, by the way, according to some doctors. We're seeing all kinds of people running out to buy products to help, to the point where mass supplies are not able to get to China where they're needed. I know that one organization, Project Hope, is sourcing masks and clothing for doctors out of Europe. They can't even get it elsewhere. So,
That's right.
I think that we just need to be rational about this.
I totally agree with you. And, back when we were growing up, Daria, and probably got a few years on you, but when we were growing up, the media's goal was to connect the dots. In this day and age that we live in now, they are all about disconnecting the dots, not giving you context, and not really explaining to you what the story means. And they never engage in any deconstruction whatsoever. I don't want to get into politics so much, but when you look at the impeachment inquiry and all the Ukrainian stuff, they're totally disconnecting the dots. The Bidens are holy. They're pure people. They would never do anything wrong, right? And yet we know that they're totally corrupt, right? Am I making it up?
Very much so. In the early 1990s, there was a TNN British news crew that was in Sarajevo. And what happened was there was a marketplace bombing about a mile from that crew. And that's the first time in the history of the world that there was instantaneous satellite coverage by a news crew for a warlike area. And what happened is news changed on that day because the stories that were flashing to London showed pictures of a burning marketplace, the bodies strewn around that were killed or maimed, and there was no analysis. So people all of a sudden around the world saw these images but had no idea if it meant somebody was upset about their job at the marketplace or whether there was an invasion, a military insurrection, whether it was separatist. Nobody understood the analysis. And what this did is it took away from the time that foreign policy analysts, and eventually this became true in the domestic market too, there was no time for analysis. People had instantaneous coverage, and it became more entertainment. These visual images that were horrific were causing people to watch the news to see what was happening rather than to think about what was happening.
Yeah, no context, no nothing. And that's what they're all about. This is what they do for us and to us, if you will. And really, I guess we're willing to put up with it. So it's on us, but it's really kind of disheartening and sad to see. Well, we really appreciate you coming on with us. Daria, is there any place we can send people on the web to find out more about you and connect with you, perhaps?
I'm on LinkedIn at Daria Novak, and also our articles and different writings are found at usagovpolicy.com, usagovpolicy.com.
All right, and we'll link that. Really appreciate you coming on. Been a pleasure. Learned a lot from you. Any questions or comments for Daria, myself? Where do you think the whole China thing is heading? Just email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Our Twitter feed is @KerryLutz. Facebook is Financial Survival Network. And of course, our home site is financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Daria, it's been a real pleasure. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.